Brown, 45. Brown, 45. Hot, 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 hot.
You are listening to Any Given Sunday, Australia.
Yes, hello and welcome to the Any Given Sunday Australia podcast, the number one podcast in at least 3 households, 1 studio. American football, Australia head office, Wade, he cannot get around us anymore. NFL Australia head office, they all love us. We're getting closer. We're getting closer to the start of the season. Joining me, as always, in his little, it's not a basement, his little bedroom, but his room, in his corner of Melbourne, at Danny Webb, AGS AU. How are you, mate?
I don't know how many times I have to tell you. This is my guest suite of my.
Oh, it's the wing. House. It's the guest wing. I keep forgetting.
How could you be so confused? Ignore the bed in the background. Just ignore that. Ignore that.
Yeah, don't worry. You have comfy guests. Don't stress. We apologise for the late episode. You know, life gets in the way sometimes, but we've got it out, and it's a big one. Danny, you have been flashing the shirt for those that are following on the socials, on the YouTube. It is our AFC East chat.
Try again.
Our preview.
Try again.
We're going to get into it. You're going to love it. But we do have a couple of things that I want to have a talk to you about before we get into it, Danny. We had a big competition that we've started in the last week. It's going to be drawn. We're going to draw it next week on next week's episode. So we got, 3 or 4 more days to get around it. It's for a Madden code. So make sure you hit up our socials, both Instagram or X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Danny. Put in there what console you play, and make sure you're following us on all the socials for your chance to win a Madden code. I know, Danny, you're putting your name in there.
Oh, absolutely. You know I am. But just to refresh there, I think you just said we're doing the AFC East. We're definitely doing the NFC East.
Yeah, you're all over it. We already done the AFC East. I've behind the scenes, mate. There's so much to do. I'm all over it. But NFC East, yes. And make sure this year, Danny, you are geared up with your team before the start of the season. I've got our long sleeve on. Make sure you've got all our team. What is the website you've got to head to, Danny?
Anygivensunday.duskautomat.com, but you can find it on any of our link trees. So just jump on any of the socials and jump on the link tree. It's the easiest way. Get some fresh merch. Got plenty of compliments on it this week, actually, when I was rocking it out in public. So don't be afraid to jump on.
I'm just about to hit up a new order and maybe get a couple of different teams. I don't like telling people what the teams are, but they are some good-looking colours.
It's a fresh colourway. That's all it matters.
It is. And one other date that I had to mention before we get into the NFC East, as I mentioned, and you mentioned, that August 28th, which was Wednesday, our time, so it was 27th over in America. It was actually the 53-man cut day, Danny. So a big day for a lot of people working out whether they're actually making the team or they're getting a roster spot. So every team is down to their 53-man starting roster. Huge day for a lot of people getting picked and getting their first start on the roster, Danny.
Yeah, it was. And there's been a little bit of movement since then as well. Like a few people have been dropped again from that 53-man. They picked other people up. There's been a couple of trades, but that's a whole nother deep dive episode. We'll get into that closer to the start of the season.
Yeah, it was just an interesting one we needed to put in there. But you're right, let's get into the NFC East. Your team, your Birds. I'll get on to last season first. It was a pretty tight season between you and the Cowboys. Cowboys finishing on top, 12-5. You guys 11-6, both making the playoffs though. And the Giants and the Commanders falling away. Giants 6-11, Commanders 4-13. But you both lost in the wild card weekend, Danny. Cowboys lost to my Packers. Your boys lost to the Bucks. We've spoken about both of those games. We don't need to get into those games anymore for yourself. The biggest thing that I get out of this, and it's such a weird competition, or weird division, there hasn't been a back-to-back winner since your Eagles they won from 01 to 04. So we're coming up 20 years this year since there's been a back-to-back winner, Danny. Can you see you obviously want it to happen again because you want your Eagles to top it this year.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a whole lot more. But yeah, I can't see there being a back-to-back winner this year, especially with what the Cowboys did in the off-season.
That's a great little segue, mate. Let's get straight into it. The off-season stories. We're going to start with your Birds. And my question to you and my question to all of the Eagles fans, How big of a loss will Jason Kelsey actually be for your offense and Jalen Hurts?
Huge. Like, it can't be understated how big of a loss it's going to be. He was the one who always, called out the defense, let Jalen know exactly what coverage there was. It kind of took half the role of the quarterback than what is normally done. That all fell on Jason Kelsey, and he was the leader of that team. He was the one who pushed. He was the one who did the speeches. Like, he was the motivator. There is a huge hole now in that. And there is a little bit of worry of how Jalen Hurts is actually going to perform when he does have to read the defense and it all goes down to him. I know Philly have just signed another center because maybe they're not necessarily happy with the one that there was. They've signed another one to the 53-man roster. Don't quote me on the name because it's slipped my mind. But, so they're still at this point where, a week away from week one, game day, and they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with that piece. That just shows you how big of a loss he has been.
Yeah, and Carts and I always say he is the ultimate locker man, like locker room guy as well. Like knowing that there's no point where you guys are out of any game, like going in at halftime, you might be down 2 or 3 scores, but he'd be the kind of guy that'd be like, "No, boys, let's turn this shit around for sure."
And I think like last year as well, our record being 11 and 6, it just wasn't really, reflective of how the team was actually playing. There was, I think they went on like a 9-0 run or whatever to start, then lost 6 out of 7 games after that. So the continuity of the team wasn't quite there. You could tell that Jalen Hurts had completely lost trust in Nick Sirianni. And then they've gone in and they've, had a change in OC, had a change in DC, so brought in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio to try and actually, get this train back on track, because last year, despite it being an 11-6 season, was a bit of a disaster.
Kellen Moore, he was at the Cowboys a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and he's a very score-first kind of offensive coordinator, so does that play into Jalen's hands? I
think absolutely it does. Like, that's Jalen, all he does want to do is score, whether it's by his hand or on his feet. Like, I think that's why he was a bit, distrusting in Nick Sirianni, because some of the stuff that was coming out from him, it just wasn't like, didn't give enough trust and, confidence in Hurts for him to actually go out and perform and do his job. Yeah,
the franchise has gotten around him, though, with the news earlier in the week that the Commanders have actually traded Johan Dotson to your Eagles for a 3rd-round pick, which sounds like a little bit of a steal from my end, I reckon.
Absolutely. I think Dotson wasn't necessarily happy in Washington. Definitely wanted to go out. He's publicly said that, as soon as Philly got Saquon Barkley, like, this team's going to be unstoppable, essentially. So then now you've got, for an offense, Jalen Hurts has these options. He's got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dotson, Goddard, and Saquon Barkley. That, like, most people don't have enough defenders to cover all 5 of those guys. Not enough high-level defenders to cover that level of talent. So, really, the offense should be storming teams. There should be storming teams right from the get-go. There's been rumors coming out of camp that Jalen Hurts hasn't thrown a single interception, or maybe one, in all of training camp. We didn't get to see much of him or any of him in preseason. So it'll be really interesting to see how they come out week 1 against your Packers.
Yeah, we're one of the teams that does have the 5 to cover that, so I'm not too worried. But as you're reeling off those names, it's definitely, well, like we said, Kellen Moore is very high-octane kind of OC, so having those kind of weapons just to spread it out, you hope that it's not going to be every week that AJ Brown's not going to get the targets every week. As long as they can work together. And Danny, you've disappeared. Yep. It's not a show without technical difficulties, Danny. But we're back. I was just saying that not each player, AJ Brown's not going to get the targets every single week. So, are they going to be able to work where 1 week it's Brown getting 10, 12 targets, the next week Dotson might be getting that kind of targets? You're not going to have 1 or 2 players worried about being the big dog each week?
I think there was so much smoke coming out last season about that with AJ Brown and like not getting on with Jalen Hurts. They have like such a good connection that wasn't necessarily the worry. And like, we've seen in the show Receiver how upset players get when they don't get the ball. I think when you know you've got that stacked of an offense, I think, especially after last season, all you're going to want to do now is win. Like, you've made it to the Super Bowl, you didn't get it done. You had a pretty poor season despite your record. So let's come back and let's get some wins on the board.
Yeah. That leads in perfectly to the Commanders we're talking about. They've traded away Dotson, but Josh Harris is coming in and brought in a new little Commanders to the table. Some big pickups, I think. You know, they're on the older end of the scale, but they come with some experience, and they're going to change again. I can't harp on it enough. The locker room, you know, Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner coming in to the Commanders and really changing it around there. Can you see them doing anything in this division this year?
Well, I think what no one, including us, are really even talking about is like the Jaden Daniels hype is actually real. If you take away Caleb Williams from this draft, and he is, you know, he's the guy, he's the one. And like Caleb Williams had so much hype, and like everyone's been following him, it's almost better. Jaden Daniels is almost in a better position because there's less pressure. He doesn't have that name to live up to, but he has been dominant. He has been dominant in this preseason, so it's going to be really good to see what he comes out with. I think like he's such a good deep ball threat, and he's great on his feet. So like, you know, so many options are open for him. It's just like he probably needs more help in the wide receiver room. The defense is really young. Like you said, they brought in a couple of, you know, good offensive additions, but the defense is super young. I really think they've got a few more years under their belt before they actually start being properly competitive in this division, but it's going to be much better than last year.
Yeah, obviously the Bobby Wagner being the older side of the defense, but I get what you're saying where the rest of them are super young. But having that guy, Bobby Wagner, around, you know, he was part of the Legion of Boom back in the day with the Seahawks. So coming over from LA last year, he's going to be super important for growing that young defense as well. So you're right, they missed out. They were in the market until this morning for Brandon Ayuk, who has signed and extended with San Fran. So missing out on him. Dotson's gone now. CD Lamb's all side up, so they're running real thin on people they can get in the wide receiver room.
Absolutely, and then like they just don't have that much depth, and that's going to be the worry. But I think they're going to look at this more as a building year anyway for Jaden Daniels, get him some reps in, you know, actual playing time, and just see how far they can actually go. I don't think they're necessarily reaching for the sky on this first season. I think Josh Harris knows that. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take a little bit of time for them to get this new look Commanders to where they actually want to be. Give them 2 years in year 2 or even year 3. I reckon they're going to be barking at the door.
Yeah. Speaking of a QB that's in year 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm not sure when short he's in. Daniel Jones. Is he the guy at the Giants? They pre-season, the only team that did not throw a single touchdown pass. Now, that blows my mind that they're playing in the 3rd, 4th, 5th defenses and they didn't even – there was no touchdown in the air. Like, how is their season going to go this year, mate?
Oh, I am sorry, New York, but you potentially – the Giants, that is – you potentially may be the worst team heading into 2024. There was nothing good going for them in preseason. Like you said, no touchdowns. Like, you're playing against much lower level talent and you still can't really get it done. I think they overpaid Daniel Jones when they did. He had a really good end to one season, and it was his contract year, so they quickly extended him. I reckon the front office is really looking back at that decision in a regretful way. You can't move on from him, because if you do, I think he's in the $45 million mark per year. That is a lot of dead money, so you just put up with it. You're not going to be competitive anyway, so you just ride it through. I'm not sure how long he's got left of his contract, but whatever it is, it's far too long.
I reckon last year was first year, so this will be year 2 of a 4-year contract, I reckon. It was about that, $130, $140 million of 4. We all said at the time, terrible contract, but you got to believe that they are still backing him internally, I guess. Like, all this it's noise outside, blah, blah, blah. Surely they're not just going, 2024's gone, dead and buried.
I reckon they're going for the number 1 pick. That's just saying, because who else are you looking at the bottom of the table? Like the Panthers, they're looking to improve. They got Bryce Young, they want to get him to get better. Surely they're looking at this division knowing they're not taking it out by any means.
I love it because you're going to have you already got all the New York Jets fans that hate you. New York Giants fans are going to be coming for you, Danny boy. This will be clipped and put on the socials and sent out to all the Giants fans for sure.
Oh, I'm ready. At Danny Webb, AGSAU, hit me.
Bring the heat. The last team in this division, the Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, up until the last few days, hadn't really done much in this whole offseason. They finally signed CD Lamb. All the talk was he wanted a contract up with JJ. He got it. He's only a couple of million behind him, so that turmoil at least is put behind them. I just saw this morning they've signed Dalvin Cook, it looks like, so a little bit more depth in the running back room. But is it a little bit too little too late for this offseason?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what Jerry Jones was really thinking. I think he almost wanted to wait and see, he said that before the offseason, didn't he say, he's like, I'm going to spend all the money, I'm going to make our team better. And he did nothing. He literally did nothing. So I don't know if he's just waiting to see, how deep their run is. And if it's not the NFC title game, realistically, then he's going to go for a complete restructure. There's so much pressure on Mike McCarthy. 3 straight years of 12 wins per season, but only 1 playoff win. That's not good enough. Currently last in cash spending. That was prior to this deal with CD Lamb. I don't actually know where they sit after that, but in the offseason, it was they just weren't really doing anything.
Yeah. And I remember that draft party or the draft day that I went to up on the Gold Coast, sitting in a car with Loz Horesh, and he was just there, even then, which is, April, going, we're not going to do anything this offseason. Jerry's just holding his cards close to his chest. And he was right. It was until the last week of technically still preseason. I reckon we're almost in season, and they've finally splashed a little bit of cash. But you're right, the pressure on Mike McCarthy, he'd be up there. We've said a couple of coaches are right in the hot seat, but he's definitely up there. 3 straight years, out week 1 last year. If they don't make it to NFC title games, I can see him very much on his ass out the door.
100%. This is his last season, his last chance, I think, to actually make an impact. And yeah, with the way that it's looking, who knows?
Yeah, I know the Cowboys fans are happy. I think they're the team. They're obviously doing enough to make and win games. But was there any positives coming out of the preseason?
Yeah, there was one good positive coming out of there, and that was Trey Lance. Trey Lance, make him dance, led all players in passing yards with 662 yards, but he also led them in rushing with 168 yards in the preseason, which was impressive. But unfortunately, there's always a but with Trey Lance. He also led everyone in interceptions.
Spit it out. He did. He led the interceptions. I watched one half of a game where he threw up a couple. I was just like, good old Trey Lance still doing his bit, helping the defense out, growing their confidence as well. Of the opposition, though, that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. But, Dak Prescott, as long as he stays healthy, Trey Lance won't be really taking much of the field anyway. But it's just always...
He'll be taking 0 of the field. Maybe a knee every now and then. We move on to Cardi's strength of schedule. He's obviously not here, mate. Are you happy? Can you work this out, his little graph that he's got going?
Yeah, I reckon I can work through it. So the Giants, surprisingly, have the 13th hardest schedule. And then the Cowboys come in, 13th hardest schedule with a week 11 bye. The Cowboys then have the 11th hardest schedule with a week 7 bye. The Commanders have the 13th easiest. And then my Birds got the 9th easiest with a week 5 bye.
Yeah, that's the only, looking back, Cowboys week 7 is not great either. But Carts, if he was sitting here, he'd be devastated with this Eagles week 5 bye, mate. You're obviously the big Birds fan. How are you feeling with it?
Yeah, it's super early. I would much prefer it to be later in the season, but there is a few games that we've probably already chalked down as a win towards the end of the season. So whether, we are playing not our full side, or let's say we get a very early lead and we sit some players in the second half. There's ways around it. I'm not loving it, but just trying to be positive.
Positive. You got no choice. It is what it is. The only thing that I think does play in its favour is you obviously have the Brazil game straight up. So getting those 4 games, but you've got that travel in there as well. Maybe that early season bye, especially for some of the older players. That's the positive side you have to find, is that you've got some early travel under your belt.
Yeah, and the Brazil game's super exciting. I can't wait for that.
Yeah. So we're just over a week until week 1, which is huge. So we've got one more preview to do, and then we're here. But the I've picked them again, and probably not as big of a surprise this one as some of the ones that we have done. Coming in at the lower end of the schedule. Believe it or not, it's the Giants that you've picked on this entire episode. And I did find it hard to find them a win, unfortunately. I found them 3. They got 3 and 14, mate. Is it how am I sitting with the bookies? I've got a feeling that I'm not too far off the mark with that.
Let me just get to the odds. But I love how you say I've been picking on them the whole season, the whole episode. You've just given them the number 1 pick as well.
Yeah, well, we haven't done next week's yet.
The over under is sitting at 6.5, so you've gone well and truly.
6.5.
You've gone well and truly under.
Now the under's favourite though, sure.
Under's favourite, yeah.
3 and 14. I was seriously going through, and I reckon the 3 wins were even they're in New York. Maybe I'll give them that one. But yeah, they have their best player last year was probably McKinney on the defensive side. Well, Barkley as well, but on the defensive side, McKinney, and he's gone. He's at my Packers. So I'm going to find it very hard for that. I'm going to smash the unders on those boys.
Probably
the Commanders. The Commanders, I had them coming in at 5 and 12, and I reckon that's I wouldn't be surprised if they could sneak 2 or 3 more wins out of that as well. Get up to that 6, 7, maybe 8, maybe. But I reckon 5 and 12, considering they went were they 4 and 13 last year, something like that. So technically they are improving, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do sneak 2 or 3 more games and finish that mid-pack kind of 8 and 8 kind of season, I guess.
Yeah, and the bookies are agreeing with the second half of your statement there. Yeah, so they've got their over under at 6.5 as well, but the over being in the favourable side.
Yeah, okay. I do think it was one of those picking those guys. You're like, yeah, they could, but realistically, they shouldn't. But I reckon they might sneak and just pinch a few games from a few different teams this year. I had the Cowboys coming in second, so definitely in playoff contention. 11 and 6. A couple of games at home against them. You're going to give them most of the games at home, but mid-year they've got Baltimore at home, who are going to be an absolute, tear away this season. So they've got a couple of teams in there. You're like, even at home in Jerry World, they're not 100% home. But I still think 11 and 6 and probably making the playoffs this year, mate.
Yeah, I think that's fair. A very fair statement. Like we said, the NFC title or bust. The bookies have them at over 9.5 wins as the favourable one.
Yeah, and overs would be favourite, surely, yeah. That leads your birds, mate, and we had a quick discussion about this just before we come on. Considering we're playing each other week 1, I had them at 13 and 4. So a bloody good season, especially I did this pick before you had Dotson as well. So probably your 14 and 3 that you said might be a little bit closer.
And we discussed that. The other reason that we are different is probably for that week 1 game. But the bookies agree with both of us either way. They're saying it's over 10.5 wins as the favourable odd. That is hard not to hit the smash button on.
Yeah, 10.5 seems... Look, that's playoffs, isn't it? So it still seems a little bit low, especially with... we're saying that Jalen and Sirianni had their dramas last year, but a new OC, Kellen Moore coming in, all guns blazing, the 5 weapons that he's got. As long as they stay healthy, I think you're well and truly smashing that 10.5.
Yeah, and we've brought back some more weapons on the defense as well. And with Vic Fangio leading that, he's always done good things in the Dolphins. So it's hard. It's hard to say that they're going to be under 10.5 wins.
Yeah. So taking over from what Carts normally does again. The divisions that you're playing, so the intra-conference in the NFC, you're playing the NFC South. So saying that the easiest side of the schedule, NFC South's probably helping you there. AFC North, though, so you see playing some absolute weapons, in Cincinnati, Baltimore, even Cleveland, could be an absolute weapon. And then that 17th game, you've got the AFC South just slotting in there just to make it a little bit harder for you boys. But yeah, I can see why with those divisions, well, you might have the easier or more favourable draw, especially your birds with that. Was it 13th easiest or something?
Ninth easiest. Ninth
Ninth.
easiest. Finishing second in the division was probably the best thing that ever happened to us this last season.
Yeah, definitely. Losing that one game just saves everything. All right. $14 for the Giants to win the NFC East. Does that tickle any of your fancies?
I want to actually bet on them to get the number one pick. So,
Is that it? Can we do that?
100%. Bear with me. You keep going through.
I will. And so $14 obviously doesn't. I don't think Carts would jump on that either. And this year, just and agreeing with what you said, maybe next year or the year after, the Commanders at $10. It's just that little bit too much. I don't think they have that, next step in them just yet. So $10 is just juicy enough. Some people might get on it, especially if they start hot. But $10, I reckon, is a little bit too far of a jump. Where it gets interesting, Dallas coming in at $2.70. Probably a bit silly asking you if you would get around the $2.70, but does it interest you at all?
Well, with the fact that we're saying that no team's gone back-to-back in 20 years, I'm probably not touching it. And I think the bookies agree when you go to the next odds.
I wonder if that 20-year gap kind of comes into why the Eagles are $1.67. That seems a little bit too low for me. That might have changed when, I reckon this was pre-CD Lamb, these odds. So I wonder if it's slightly changed that once CD Lamb is signed.
I wouldn't be surprised if it actually does. Those odds are far too short. Like, I wouldn't be touching Eagles at that point because as much as I want them to take out the division, go all the way and win the Super Bowl, which I've jumped on, you also, like, injuries can do so much to a team. Injuries can destroy a whole team season. And we know that.
You can pad for a second. I might get there, but I reckon it should be closer to $2. Like you'd be almost $1 favorite, $1.80 favorites, like each of two kind of thing. I reckon. Although I agree that the Dallas have the curse of going back to back, not playing in their favor either.
Yeah, and like we just don't really know what is going on in behind all the scenes. Like, Jerry Jones not spending a whole lot, and then, like, how happy is actually Dak because he still hasn't got his contract, So there could be a whole lot of, locker room issues as well.
They're the exact same odds. So those odds that we just put up are current $1.67 and $2.70. I reckon that's a little bit too far. I'd like the Eagles to be a little bit more, and then I'll jump on them, I reckon. Just me being a punter. Give us a little bit more. Come on, maybe I can boost it. Get close to about $2. But I do I do agree with you, and I would jump on the Eagles. You got to take the $1.67 win sometimes.
Yeah, and I reckon maybe if you just multi it. Huh?
Multi it into the Packers, baby. We're paying a little bit more. Beautiful, mate. So it was a good episode of just bashing on the Giants. I really love and appreciate it.
Sorry, all Giants fans. Hopefully next year's better for you because it ain't this one.
Nah. Unfortunate. We've got one more to go, so we don't have to hide who it is. The AFC West, finishing off with obviously the Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. So we'll finish with those guys. We will see you next week, Danny, fit and firing. Hopefully Carts is back up and about as well, and smash it into week 1 of the season.
Oh, I can't wait. Fly, Eagles, fly, baby.